So everyone, welcome to the MCAT Workshop. Today we're going to be talking about tips and strategies for conquering the MCAT. And though our initial session was on National Cat Day and the image in our first page seemed more relevant then, I still think it is funny. I want to incorporate a sense of lightheartedness to this topic, though it is a really serious topic, and the MCAT is certainly a large part of your medical school application, but with the proper plan in place and guidance, it's certainly something that you can conquer. So what's important first and foremost is to keep your ultimate goal in mind. All of these students here just started their medical programs this fall. They too were in your seat once, thinking about taking the MCAT and starting to develop a plan for that. So just remember the ultimate goal is to become a doctor, and with small steps along the way, you can get there too. So I like to do this exercise to start the MCAT workshops. You don't have to, of course, but close your eyes and picture the MCAT as a visual image. Hold on to that image for just one moment. Open your eyes. This might be something that you're seeing right now. It's like, where do I start? It seems like a pretty big hurdle to overcome, a mountain to climb. Where do I begin? So we're here to change that for you today. And we start by talking about why preparing sufficiently for the MCAT is so important. Achieving a competitive score on an MCAT entrance exam helps you to gain admittance to your top choice schools and programs. It also allows you to keep your options open with regard to schools and programs to which you will be applying to. With that competitive score, you become competitive for more programs. Another reason it is important to prepare sufficiently for the MCAT is to get accepted earlier in the application cycle. The application cycle, as we know from our previous workshops on the timeline, is quite long and spans 14 months. So getting an acceptance earlier certainly helps to alleviate any concerns or allow for you to feel confident in what you're delivering to medical schools so that your practice of patients through the timeline is stress-free. The last point, and the one I think that is the most important, is that the MCAT prepares you for the rigors of preclinical and clinical training. This is the first step in your professional journey. The MCAT is more than just an exam to do well on. It is testing knowledge acquired, problem-solving skills, and critical thinking in a way that's extremely pertinent to your future career and how you practice medicine. It's also the first of what will be a number of other tests that will come along your professional path. So I always encourage students to look at the MCAT as a step in your professional journey, as something that you're doing for your future patients, rather than simply an exam to be achieved. Before one sits down to create a plan and study for the MCAT, it's important to have completed the following courses before taking the MCAT and before developing that plan. The following will give you a basic foundation upon which you will build in preparation for taking the MCAT. This includes general biology, general and organic chemistry, genetics and molecular biology, biochemistry, which many students will say is really a gateway course between undergraduate and medical school. and is a large component of the MCAT. Physics, psychology, and sociology, because 1/4 of the MCAT is behavioral, and having some background in research and statistics. Any type of statistics course is okay. This can be experiential research. You might, if you have additional room in your schedule, consider additional courses in biology and behavioral science in order to prepare for the MCAT. Beware, though, that different programs, DO, MD, and different schools have varying course requirements. So while these are the courses that will largely be covered on the MCAT exam, there may be other courses that are required for the schools you're applying to. So make sure you're thinking about and researching these as well. Getting started. So once you've completed those courses, it's now time to turn your attention to the MCAT. The first thing you'll want to do is read the material that's on the AAMC website that pertains to the MCAT. It will also provide you resources free and some at low cost that help guide you through preparation for test day. One of these things is the AAMC official guide to the MCAT, which costs $35. Another thing to do as you start to gear up before you prepare for the MCAT is to make a folder for each exam section. List the topics in each exam section. And these sections and foundational concepts, the topics, can be found on that AAMC website I listed above. Also, take the time to gather your notes from lectures, problem sets, compile your textbooks, review articles to cover each topic. So these will be from previous courses that you may have taken or other materials you might have acquired over time. Start to read dense and complex material daily. The MCAT exam is very much about problem solving. You'll read a lot of passages. Many students will say, within the passages is something that will give you a clue to the answer to that question. Being able to read dense and complex material is one of the best ways to prepare for the format of the MCAT exam. Examples include The Economist, The New York Times, and scientific journals. Think about preparing for the MCAT in this order. Study first, practice second, and then study more. And when you repeat your studying in this fashion, you'll be able to go over questions that you might have got wrong, hone in on weak areas, and really tailor your studying to best meet your needs. Practice tests are key and something that many of our students encourage or state as being one of the most instrumental tools in preparing them for the MCAT. The length of the exam is quite long. It's 7.5 hours in duration, with 2 15-minute breaks and 1 30-minute break in the middle. You really want to practice for the endurance needed for this exam. Full-length practice tests are extremely crucial in this regard. The next step along this journey is to develop a study plan. Again, review the AAMC's website, where there they have a free guide to help you set up a study plan. The makers of the test do state that this is an extremely underutilized but useful resource. especially for students who are primarily self-studying for the MCAT exam. So I definitely can't stress this resource enough to you. Another thing you want to do before you turn your attention to content review and studying is to start with a diagnostic test to analyze what you need to study most. This will help give you a starting point and help you to determine what your target score will be and how much study is needed between that initial test and test day. Plan a realistic study schedule. The MCAT preparation time can be stressful. It can often result in students saying to themselves, if I just study 1 more hour today, or, oh, I can sleep only 5 hours, or I can do less of this to make time for the MCAT. It's super important to make time for yourself too. You learn best when you focus on your self-care and when you ensure you're physically and mentally able to take on the rigors of studying for the MCAT. Our suggestion, 10 to 20 hours maximum per week for about 4 to 6 months. It's important to build in a few flex days in case you are feeling overwhelmed or you're getting behind, or for just incidentals. Things come up. We can't plan for every moment. So building in flexibility allows for those situations to occur and not set us too far back. After taking your diagnostic exam, start to study your weakest areas. Plan to come back to them at the end of your study schedule so that you are always reviewing the weak areas of content so that you're prepared for the exam in a much more well-rounded way. Most days, you'll want to study from all 4 sections of the exam, and it is especially important to practice CARS every day, which is the critical analysis and reasoning section. Another good tool to utilize in your study plan is joining a study group. You, along with your peers, are going through this time together. There are thousands upon thousands of students taking the MCAT every year. There is no reason that all of you can't perform exceptionally well. You are not in competition with one another. You can use each other as tools, as companions, and as teammates in this journey. Should I take a test prep class? This is a question I hear very often from students. The AAMC tells us that about 50% of matriculated students do take a prep class. They do provide structure, pacing, and accountability. However, a test prep class alone is not enough to prepare for the MCAT. You will still need to study on your own. Test prep classes may be good for someone who would like more structure, who would like a bit more content review, but it's certainly not something that you must do, especially because they can be quite expensive. If you're the type of person who can set a schedule and stick to it, then a test prep class might not be necessary for you. It's important to also mention that test prep companies do have a tendency to peddle anxiety. What I mean by that is some of the diagnostic or full-length practice exams offered by test prep companies often deflate scores. they aren't as reflective of how you would score on test day. For that information, it's really important to take the test makers practice exams, the full-length AAMC practice exams, which there are 3 of. This is not to say that you shouldn't take others, but just something you want to keep in mind. That being said, while I mentioned, that test prep companies can be quite expensive, we do have a number of free resources we wanted to point you towards. The first is the AAMC MCAT materials. Here you will see the full-length practice exams, an MCAT bundle that includes 2,000 practice questions, plus the sample test, plus the 3 practice exams, at a much lower price point than is offered with the test prep companies. AAMC also has a number of free materials here in preparation for MCAT. Khan Academy has videos that help test prep for MCAT. There are a number of massive open online courses for students who are looking for a bit more content review. Anki is a web-based program and app that uses student-developed flashcards to supplement studying. My word of advice on Anki is to take it with a grain of salt. They are student-developed flashcards, so you'll want to check them for accuracy. Our MCAT spreadsheet is a document created by pre-health students at Northeastern who have taken the MCAT and shares information on their study plan and what they did to be successful on the exam. Pre-health also has a resource center. If you're looking for a quiet place to study or to borrow gently used MCAT materials and books, you can visit us in 315 Richards Hall. We do still have quite a few MCAT books left in our lending library and a couple of carols that are a nice quiet place to study. The next resource is one that I'm very excited about. Northeastern, for the first time, is offering a free MCAT prep course. So, something that will provide somewhat similar material than that is provided in a test prep company course, but at $0. It's free to Northeastern students. Brian will be teaching this course. Brian took the MCAT last year. And after feeling disillusioned by the prices of MCAT study courses, decided he wanted to empower students to reach their potential by offering lessons and coaching through high yield material. And he will be covering this high yield science content on Thursday evenings, beginning tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Brian's course will run through the end of the fall semester and through the spring semester to prepare students to take the MCAT in April, May, and June. Again, this course, as with other courses, is meant to supplement studying. Students may attend any or all sessions. The first is in Baracus 10 tomorrow evening. As I mentioned before, student panel notes will be provided in the email following this presentation. When should you sit for the MCAT exam? This is one of the most important questions a student may ask themselves And the answer is to only sit for an MCAT exam when you are ready to achieve your best score. There should be no rush to sit for the test. The best time is to take it when you've had 4 to 6 months of studying and are achieving on your practice exams the way you hope to achieve on test day. The best time to take it is after you've completed your course requirements and then taken time to study for the exam. Once you do come to the point that you decide to register for your MCAT exam, you want to select a test date that allows you to receive your score and still apply early for that application cycle. If you're planning to apply in 2020, January, March, and April tests would allow for the scores to be released before the medical school applications open in June. For those taking the test in May, scores will be released before schools receive your primary application. So what that means is that you may apply to medical school early in June, and while the AAMC is reviewing your AMCAS application and verifying it, which takes about 4 to 6 weeks, your MCAT scores will come in. The first day applications are released to MD programs has typically been the end of June. So a May test date would allow for your MCAT score to come in before the end of the following month. June tests allow for scores to be released after schools receive your primary applications. But you're still eligible to apply with a committee letter if you have a June MCAT test date. A June test may slightly delay the processing of your primary application and receipt of that to the medical schools. When selecting test dates, keep these 3 things in mind. Registering for the MCAT. Registering early is important for you to get a seat on the date that you want and in the location that you want. January through June registration is now open. It opened last week on October 25th. So if you have not already, it is important to register as soon as possible for MCAT test dates within that range. If you are thinking you will take the MCAT later on a test date between July and September, registration will open in February. Again, I will repeat, it is not a good idea to take the MCAT if you are not ready. It is better to either reschedule your test date, cancel, or take the test and void your score than to receive a non-competitive score for medical schools. Your goal is to put in the time to study and prepare. Take a look at the data being provided to you in the form of your practice exams to help you determine the appropriate time to take the MCAT. Once you register for the MCAT, it's really important to ensure that your name on your registration is exactly as it appears on your government-issued ID. You will present 2 forms of government-issued ID when you go to take the test. This needs to match the name that you registered under exactly. To prepare for test day, you want to simulate test day conditions. This means completing your practice tests in the same areas, in a place that's quiet but not silent. It might mean getting up at the same time as you would for the day of the test, eating the same meals throughout the day, and taking your breaks when you would take them in the actual exam. You want to expect distractions. People may start at different times and take their breaks at different times because there might be people in the room that are taking different exams, like the GRE, for example. Be prepared for distractions in a nearly silent, but not entirely silent environment, similar to a library. If you approach the first question on the exam and it's too difficult or scares you, skip it and move on. Return to it later. Good advice as you're gearing up to prepare for exam day. It's also okay not to achieve a perfect score. It's not meant to be a test that you achieve a perfect score on. Your goal should be to have a competitive score. If for some reason test day does not go the way you think it would, you always have the option to cancel or void the test. This might be the case if, for example, you were ill or didn't finish a section. That being said, you will come out of that exam with a few doubts, and that's okay. As I mentioned before, the goal is not necessarily to achieve a perfect score. It's about achieving your best and most competitive. Test day. The day before the test, relax and don't study. Unwind, exercise, or meditate. Do something that will take your mind off the exam. The night before your exam, go to bed early, and though you might be anxious, do your best to get a good night's rest. The morning of your exam, wake up early, just as you were doing for your practice exams, and eat your breakfast. Don't forget your 2 forms of government-issued ID. Another thing to consider as test day comes nearer is to plan to arrive to the test center early. To do this, it's important to conduct a test run in the morning traffic if possible. Check transportation schedules for public transit, parking directions if you are driving, and on the day of your test, allow for extra time. Logistics on test limits. Per AAMC policy, you may take the MCAT up to 3 times in a testing year, 4 times over 2 years, and 7 times in a lifetime. The Pre-Health Advising Programs policy is that the MCAT should only be taken once in a calendar year for committee letter eligibility. The reason for this is because if you don't receive a competitive score, We do not recommend for most applicants that you take the exam again within a few months. You could, but this is strongly not recommended. Rather, what we would like to see you do is give yourself another 4 to 6 months of preparation for the exam, which may mean deferring your application to the next cycle. This will give you time to reapproach the material. It also shows good judgment in not rushing back to take an exam that you aren't ready for. One poor score is not necessarily a black mark on your record, but 2 poor scores could be a red flag for the admissions folks. Questions may be raised about a student's maturity or their commitment to medicine, their ability to handle complex materials. And this is why it is extremely important to take your time before retaking an MCAT if that's something that you feel you should do following receipt of your first score. So this takes us to the end of our presentation. The takeaways here are for you to develop a study plan, not rush your studying, but use it as a way to gain the experience and familiarity with the test, understanding of content, so that when you do take your MCAT exam, you're fully prepared to achieve the score that you desire. We've also covered some topics of resources and housekeeping items with regard to registration for the MCAT. Please refer back to those as you feel you need and at integral times in your studying. Now, I will turn the floor over to you to ask any questions, and thank you all for coming to the MCAT virtual workshop. Thank you.